Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the OTF webinar, Redefining Literacy, Getting Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable. Our presenter tonight is the one and only Alana King. And I can say that because I have known her for a few years. Our paths have crossed, and I can tell you she's been a techie from way back. So I'm very excited to see how she has combined this with her passion for reading and literacy. As I mentioned, I will be in the behind the scenes and really looking forward to this one as well too. So without further ado, I'm passing it over to Alana.
Thank you so much, Trish. If anybody is having any trouble at any point, please, as Trish said, just raise your hand. This is about you, and yeah, I have lots and lots of material. We can keep going as deeply as you want to, but I really hope that you take away a number of things tonight. So we are going to redefine literacy, and that might be the first step in being uncomfortable. But if you're okay with that, we're going to go further down the rabbit hole and begin with this. I live in Elora, Ontario, Canada, and the reason that I want to bring that up is because, A, I like to brag. I mean, how pretty is that? But the other thing is that my community really defines the context in which I teach. And one of the ways that I come to technology and education is because of the reach that technology gives me, both for my ability to teach, but also for my ability to learn. And I think that you'll see that a lot of what I have to say tonight is about the journey of coming to some of these ideas. And you may be at a different point in your journey. You may be already past it, but as I said, I hope there's something here for everyone. So without further ado, this is about what I do right now at this moment. I'm 1/6 of an online English teacher, so my students are all over Ontario. I would teach a ministry-based curriculum, which I modify as I desire. And the other 5/6, I'm a teacher librarian in kind of a community high school is how I describe it. We've got something for everyone. And there are other options in our geographical area for students to attend to, but it's not a program-based school. So we have everything, a very, very diverse learner basis in our school. So let's just start here finding out who are you a little bit, who's in the room. So we're going to use some of those handy tools that Trish was showing you at the beginning. Let's go over to the one that looks a little bit like a picture at the bottom of your bar. What's that called again, Trish?
That's the vertical toolbar.
Your vertical toolbar. So looking at your vertical toolbar, the last icon at the bottom, if you click that, can I see if anybody can put who's from the secondary panel? Would you take a star and put the star on this slide for me? And if you're in the elementary panel, I assume you're happier, so could you please grab the happy face and put that out there? And if you think I'm not elementary or secondary, that doesn't really define me. I've got a different role altogether. Maybe you could grab the exclamation mark for me and put that up. Okay, we've got one. I knew you were out there somewhere. And Farron says over on the right that she's K212. Okay, I don't know what icon should we do for Farron. I don't know if you're Happy or Lisa in primary. I just always assume you are because your world is full of more colorful things. Maybe elementary for sure. Okay, so what I really want to know is there anybody in the room who actually has like power? Is there anybody who has influence? What about money? If you have any of those things, maybe you can give me an arrow pointing up. No? No arrows? Okay, we're all frontline people working. Oh, there's someone who has power, influence, and money. Fantastic. We'll talk later. All right. So moving along, I just want to give you a little bit of background about what my experience has been so far. So if you look at the picture on the left, in 2009, this is a lot like what my classroom looked like. I started teaching in the arts, drama, media art, and I moved in 2009 into the library. I took one section at first, and then I went whole hog after that. So I've been doing this for almost a decade now. It's kind of exciting and satisfying to hear that. But really, my classroom did look like that picture on the left, where we would sometimes do things as a whole class moving in tandem. And what shocked me when I moved into the library is how competitive the atmosphere was. What I mean by that is that people were struggling for resources, that things like access to equipment was a really big deal. And what I'm thinking about with that is one particular story that happened to me when I was in my first year of being a teacher librarian, and that was that I was managing kind of a computer lab in a sense. Our library books were in a different place. What was in front of me as the librarian all day long were two computer labs, and all the computers, just like the picture here, the computers were facing the wall. So people were side by side, not a lot of elbow room. Can you just give me a thumbs up if that's kind of been your experience? Is that your experience where you're in one of those competitive atmospheres where people are struggling for equipment? And to do that, you might go to the top of the chat. There you go, you know where it is. I can see some people doing that, yeah. And the reason that I bring that up is because that was one of my first indicators that I needed some change. And I saw a student sit down in class one day, and he had a supply teacher that day, but he'd come to the library with the supply teacher. And what he had done is he pulled out his phone and he was texting some of his friends who were not there yet, and he was saying, you know, hey, we've got a supply teacher, but we really need to work on that group work. And he pulled up Facebook because he started chatting with somebody who wasn't going to be able to make it in. And so that was going, and the supply teacher came over and said, hey, look, put your phone away, get off Facebook, and I want you to get back to work. And I thought, uh-oh, we've got a problem here, because really the student was studying, and that was just kind of a misunderstanding, I think, of the situation. It was one of the first things that started me on my journey about educational technology and how can we better integrate it. I think someone had a question. Does anybody have something that they wanted to say? Do you want to grab the mic for a minute, or do you want to put it in the chat box? Okay, no problem, Lisa, thanks. So moving along, the next thing I saw were people making kind of radical decisions. And I'm going to say that this happened around the year 2003, 2004. And I've been in the library for about 3 or 4 years. That's no problem. But what we decided to do was a remodel. And what I wanted to do in that case was kind of, you know, again, get back to that arts atmosphere where kids could choose the tool that they wanted and they could decide how they were going to learn. You know, that could have been a flip chart and some markers. It didn't matter to me, some sticky notes. But I also was very, very conscientious of making sure that, you know, we had something for everyone. So we redesigned the library, turning it into Library Learning Commons. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But these pigeons on the sign represent the people who were making these kind of radical decisions about the direction we were going to take. And what we did is we took 45 desktop computers and we turned them into 150 Google Chromebooks. And it radically, radically changed the culture of the environment. For one thing, the mobile devices were fantastic. Kids loved the idea that they were now mobile, but suddenly we were short on things like Wi-Fi, and we were short on, with that desire, we were short on how much people wanted to engage with computers. So suddenly the demand increased again. And of course, Chromebooks involve those tiny little touchpads, so it really wasn't the device for everyone, because anybody with some sort of mobility issue or who was new to computers at all was struggling with the interface. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we keep going, but I want you to know I've been through this journey. I didn't come to all of that. So I'm going to this slide because I was trying to think of the oldest example of text I could think of, and hieroglyphics were one. Not that I teach hieroglyphics, but sometimes I compare this to something that we hold on to like Shakespeare. And I did my degree in drama the first time, so I absolutely love Shakespeare. I took every Shakespeare course I could find. But I think we need to move to a different idea about the word text. So maybe we're thinking about things like videos. Videos could be texts. That's no problem. What about blogs? Blogs, is anybody blogging? Maybe a thumbs up on that one for me. Do we have any bloggers out there? Okay, good. We've got a blogger. Judy, throw your blog in the link if you want more followers. And how about tweeters? Anybody who's on Twitter? Any tweets out there? The Twitterati? Good. So we've got some more people there too. Good. And I think of all of those things as little text, and we're still defining those things, though, by essentially words. And what I want to move to is that text beyond that can be not just based on words, but based on visuals, based on music. I think Lisa Noble will like that idea. Music itself could be a text. Anyway, we're going to keep working on this redefining, but let's just say something common you see every day in your classroom that I'm going to say is our redefining text of the moment, a t-shirt. When you look at t-shirts, I want you to think of them as texts. All right, moving on. So if we redefine text, then of course we also have to redefine the word reading. So if you'll go a little further down the rabbit hole with me, the idea of reading then is perceiving anything that can be seen as a text. And we're going to play a lot with those two ideas tonight, by the idea of text and the idea of reading. So go along with me, keep stretching that mind to be open about those two redefinitions already. And let's talk about this one. So the word transliteracy is not a new word. This is a word that has been around since at least the 1970s. And the idea is simply that there's an ability to read and write and interact across a range of platforms. So going back to the idea of when we decided to get everybody a Chromebook, this is kind of the problem, is that those students now, when they come to a desktop, they don't know how to interact with it. If I suddenly give them an iPad, they might be able to swipe around a little bit, but the nuts and bolts of how to make sure that that iPad is working at its optimum level, that is tricky. So it's the transfer across platforms, the transfer across mediums that I'm concerned with. And this is where I think we need to get to. This is where I think transliteracy and the redefinition of literacy needs to get to. That until we can achieve the ability to cross those platforms, tools, and mediums, we're not really literate anymore. Who are you thinking about when I say that? Do you know somebody who's much older than you, perhaps, who is struggling with these things? Someone who's much younger, someone who's disadvantaged in any way and has a barrier to be able to interact with platforms across that. Maybe it's experiential, but maybe not. Let's try some of this transliteracy. I'm going to introduce you to the media triangle if you've never seen this before. This image itself is from the Association for Media Literacy, one of Ontario's own actually runs the site right now, Michelle Solomon. And if Michelle was here, I know she'd be excited. But I really love this image. As an English teacher, as a media teacher, as a librarian, I come back to it all the time. Let's have a look at it then. Obviously, it's a triangle, so it's got 3 sides. I'm going to just grab my pointer. And I'm just talking a little bit about here, the audience to start with. You know, how the audience perceives the medium, but also how the audience who it was constructed for perceives it. Betty's asking, you will have slides? Yes, absolutely, you'll have access to the slides after the webinar. The other thing that I want to encourage you to just look is at some of those other things that are in there, the textual competence, and we'll come back to that. The text itself, how difficult is it, or how is it constructed, and is it of a new medium that we no longer feel comfortable with? And of course, the psychology, the social function of the audience. You know, if you're in a moment of fear, for example, you're going to perceive something very differently than if you were in a moment when you were relaxed. Jumping down to production. Production in terms of who controls the production, what kind of money and their agenda was before that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up here is the legalities. We'll talk a little bit about some of the ownership issues that are new with new mediums and new texts. And finally then, text. This doesn't look a lot different than we probably taught it 400 years ago, really. But whose values are represented? what are some of the codes or formalities in the style of that particular text can we rely on. You know, a t-shirt generally has 2 sleeves, for example, and it'll have an image in the middle of the front of it. That's all part of the t-shirt code. The genre, if it falls into one, the values that are being represented, the commodity, is the text being sold, for example, or is the text one of those beautiful recombinations of things? So, does everybody feel relatively comfy with the media triangle? Can I have a thumbs up over in the next to your name, please? Good. Any questions right now? You're thinking, oh, this is easy. No problem. Okay, so we're going to try something I think never been done before, and that is we're going to read a video together. So I've put a link there. I think Trish is going to put it into the chat window so you can jump in. And this is well, you know what? I don't know if I want to ruin it for you. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take 4 minutes and we're going to watch it. So please jump out to your browser, put on your headphones, turn off your microphone if you've got it on. I don't think anybody does. And I'd like you to watch the video. But while you're watching it, please keep in mind the media triangle. Go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to ask as you come back from the video that you just simply put a thumbs up so that we know you're ready to chat.
actually, I'd recommend a check mark because the check mark will stay longer.
Okay, perfect. So let's switch over to check mark. If you're ready to chat and you've finished watching the video, please put a check mark next to your name. Thanks, Trish. Okay, excellent. I think we've got the majority of people coming. So when you're ready, if you would jump over to the chat box now, I've left you a question there. Let's talk about just the audience side of this video. Who is this video made for? Who is it targeted at? And maybe more importantly, is that person you? Mike says Beyonce fans. And Mike, is that you? Mike, I still see your check marks up, so that means you're a Beyonce fan, right? Oh, Melissa says yes, me. Good, of course, great. Yeah, exactly, Lisa. Thank you for saying that. We're automatically, is this a money-making video? Are we trying to get money? It's interesting. Okay. Judy, we're going to come back to that. I think that's really a text point. If you could argue about audience in this case, and that who would be spoken to, I suppose, that's what I'm trying to get at. Maybe you could just fill me in a little bit more about that. Brian, only popular culture? Isn't this have appeal for everybody? Is popular culture defined by, I don't know, I never know how to say this word. It's one of those words I've read a million times, but I was thinking zeitgeist? Melanie, boom, comes in with the gender. Was this meant for females? I don't know, it works on me. Every time I watch this video, I think it has something to do with the key in the music. I get like tingly and kind of like that prickly feeling in my eyes. I hate it. It just really, really works on me. Okay, Judy says, yeah, you're part of the audience, but maybe this is more for some sort of donor, right? All right, what was it? We're going to jump to the media triangle part now in terms of production. So in terms of production, I'm trying to spell things and type and talk. In terms of production, what did you notice? And I'm going to just bring up this thing that we've got here where I think Lisa said it first, then Judy. This is about donating to something. Is it? How do you know? What are the codes that are inside of this? Is there something in terms of the way that it's produced? Nice. Melanie comes in with a color comment about purity and innocence. This is about Beyonce representing maybe those two ideas, right? What else did you notice? I mean, she's got the biggest production company in the world. Did anybody notice who this was actually made by? Yeah, Sheila, being an elementary librarian, did you notice those images of children? Did they tug at your heart? Yeah, it was made for World Humanitarian Day. That's right. It's the United Nations. What are they selling exactly? Sandy, I think, is trying to get there. She's saying, you know what, we've got power images here. People need help. And the lyrics, well, we'll get to the lyrics. That's text. We're going to leave it alone for now. She's surrounded by tragedy, Melanie. That's nice. And the helicopters are seen as rescuers. That's beautiful. All the images in the background had to do with some kind of disaster, need for help, requiring donations. Yeah, did you notice, so Lisa says this isn't only about children. This is about all people. All ages were represented, all genders. Yeah, Betty, I think for sure. Betty, would you mind saying what piece, when did you start to go, oh, do you remember? What part really affected you? Yeah, Judy, one of my favorite things is when the wall that's behind Beyonce at the very beginning just disappears, and then they bring the wall back at the ending. I mean, I thought she was standing on just a regular old stage. It turns that she was in front of all of those screens. Isn't it amazing? I thought so too. Really, really good. Betty likes the child drinking water because the water is clean, because it's such a, you know, an essence of life sort of thing. Was that what got you? Okay. Now, finally, we're going to move on to the idea of text. So I'm going to just put text in the box now, focus only on text. What I'm saying is, what is she saying? What is the message of the video itself? She says, I am here. And the thing that gets me, maybe as somebody who likes technology and education, but is the way that all of those little pins that fall on the map. I mean, that just gets me. You know, we're connected as a community. We're part of the same thing. Everybody has something to say and everybody has somewhere to be. Yeah, you can make a difference. That's nice, Lisa. The pins show how many people help. Yeah, maybe that's what they're showing. Or maybe it's the places where help was given. Oh, Chan, thank you for sharing that. That's perfect. And so there was a personal connection, a global idea. That's right. And Brian points out, and now we've got the UN connection because we've got the geography and we kind of understand how big the UN is. If you want to fill in anything else about text, let's have a look at that. I'm going to go to the next slide and just remind you what we've done. And one of those things is that we've looked at each of the aspects of text, audience, and production. But one of the things we didn't talk about until now is the outer circle. Outside of the circle, we're talking about analysis and creation. In a moment, we will look at that, analyzing right now. But do you think that this video, which I think, I'm just going from memory, maybe 2016, 2015, do you think it has longevity? Do you think that it's going to become outdated anytime soon? And if so, why is it unique to this moment in time? Corianne says no, it's not unique to 2018. Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa says, as soon as Beyonce is no longer cool, no one's going to watch it. Fair enough, right? I was upset about David Bowie. My kids didn't know who he was. So, yeah, there we go. It is. It's a universal message, isn't it? And everybody needs to leave their mark. So this is one of those things, you know, when you say now, you teach students who have no idea really what 9/11 is, right? Whereas many of us, for example, felt that as an impact that was global. Good, and Melanie's saying, this is really important. There's so much violence in the world. Yeah, and I think climate change has something to do with that too, right? There's lots and lots of things that are forcing us to make difficult decisions right now. Interesting. Sheila, let's just talk about that for a second. If we said powerful images in song, no matter what the song was, no matter who the singer is, we could recreate it again. Is this a cultural thing? Would people who didn't live in our culture, or Beyonce's culture for that matter, still understand or have a connection with this text? Lisa's wondering, maybe the kids don't relate as strongly. Okay. I'm glad that we've got some controversy finally happening. You guys aren't all Beyonce lovers, maybe. But we're going to just go ahead a little bit again. Okay. If we could read this video, and you've all proven that we could do that, do you think that your kids could read the video with the same level of discernment, for example, that you have? And if so, if we can read it, then could we make it? Could you just give me a check mark if you think, yeah, there's aspects of this video that I would feel comfortable making? Did everybody get that? I'm going to add a check mark if you can make it. Okay, all right, awesome. Melanie's doing it. Hey, Michelle's got something to say. But I think what I really like about this video and why I use it in class a lot is because it has to be a collaborative effort. This isn't only about Beyonce. And I think that collaboration, these are some of the skills that I worry that I'm not teaching enough of in my classroom. Okay, I want to, if I can, introduce you to this person. If you just give me erase the check marks and give me a thumbs up if you know Nina Paley's story. Okay, so Nina Paley made a movie, Sita Sings the Blues. Nina Paley is an animator. She used Flash animation, which apparently has just become not cool. Nothing works with Flash very well anymore. We're going away from it completely. But Nina Paley decided to make a movie, a full-length movie, about her own love life and how when her relationship broke up, it just left her devastated. And what she did is she compared the devastation to some stories that already existed. She took some stories out of the Bhagavad Gita, the Indian text, and she compared the Indian text story with some of the sort of 1920s chansons from France, from America, those kind of like, when you think of like a sultry jazz singer, she compared it to those blues that she had. So she put this all together, eat it like a deep piaf, exactly, but not. And I'll get you to sing it, not sing it, sorry, watch it, Lisa, and you can get back to me about what some of the details you know probably about the music better than I do. But when she put this all together, she went to release it. She said, I'm ready. She started to enter it into, theater festivals, and she was stopped by copyright. Does anybody want to guess what it was that people had a problem with? Was it the cultural appropriation of the Bhagavad Gita? No. Was it the fact that she was using cut and paste sort of images from the internet? No. It was the fact that the family's estate who owned the songs actually didn't approve of her using her songs without permission, and that they wanted to get some of the compensations for this. So Nina Paley said, but I don't have any money. I'm just a poor, heartbroken animator. And so she used a Creative Commons license. So can you just give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of the Creative Commons? A couple of you. And the idea is that, and I'm jump out to it, I think I found, yeah. Here's a website for Sita Sings the Blues. The full movie is there. And here's a great story from the Creative Commons that goes with the movie about Nina's struggle to try to release this and to make it as part of her own, and saying that the remix of these things is really what she owned. So that brings all sorts of questions, especially if we're going to go from reading to making. This is kind of what my childhood looked like. I'm going to say roughly the late 1970s to the early 1980s. And, my favorite video game was here. It's called Impossible Mission. It was great. This was my first 45 by Spandau Ballet. This thing was still part of my life because I had a record player. And if you don't know G-Force, well, you've got homework to do. So, so if technology or changes in technology are not new, then why is it so hard? Well, guess what? I couldn't find the answer easily. So I spent 4 years doing my master's in education online with the University of Alberta, and this is what I came up with. With all of that good stuff, this slide really represents why I think we have so much trouble with technology and our students today. So one of those things would be that the technology itself, of course, as you know, every day is changing, right? My board is a Google board, and we just keep coming back to the fact that there are updates that need to be done. The Wi-Fi, the equipment itself, really technology can be broken down into so many small variables at all. But when somebody comes up and go, I just don't get technology, it kind of makes me crazy, because I think, well, you drove here in a car, and a car is technology. Like, we have the ability to adapt, right? But the other thing that's happening is that we're also changing our texts. And texts, for example, come in so many different mediums now. How many of you, just show me with a check mark again, know a kid who has trouble reading a web page, maybe because of the distractions that are on the web page, maybe because of the way that it's laid out, maybe because there's an advertisement on the web page? Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that is, in a sense, that's a simple text. I mean, web pages have been around, I don't know, I'm going to say probably 2004 is maybe when they first started to really, really come alive. And maybe I would say that's the birth of like Web 1.0. I don't know, I'll have to look that up easy. That's a good Googleable question. I'm sure it's on Jeopardy somewhere. But then, you know, for someone who teaches reading, the reader piece is a big deal. And we're going to come back to you as a reader. But when you think about the readers that you work with, sometimes we don't have the ability to match the text with the reader. You know, let alone whether or not they've got a Chromebook in their hands or they've got something that they need a mouse rather than a mouse pad, right? Okay, and we've just covered reader and text and technology. Now, one more big variable over here is the user. And I think this is more than anything where we're seeing this idea of the digital divide. I'm sure that's not new to many of you, but the idea that my mom, as a user, doesn't feel comfortable with the technology or the texts anymore that she's reading. But there are also students that I work with all the time who don't have access to technology or texts in the same way that other users do in my building. So when you come to a student, you've got to think about, and maybe it's a staff member, frankly, because I know there was one exclamation mark. You're dealing with all of these variables now. This is much, much more complicated than it was when readers and texts were interacting. Just readers and texts, right? Lisa, what's a staff member? Matching reader to text is so important. Yeah, okay, it is. So this left me on my burning question. Burning question. How am I as teacher librarian going to make a difference in this? How am I going to support students and staff in developing these essential questions? I've got some ideas. Started my research. So transliteracy skills then are an ever expanding range of contexts. You know that this is true because the minute that someone new enters your classroom or enters your environment, it shakes things up, doesn't it? And that's just changing the context. We don't know who that person is or where they came from or what their lens is, but we need to acknowledge it. We need to find their voice. And then, of course, it's also the process of using information to learn, right? It's that self-sufficiency, I think, as well, that's missing in so many of our users and maybe readers. But transliteracy isn't just about perceiving messages. It's about learning how to learn and becoming metacognitively aware of what your personal strategies are that are going to help you perceive those messages better every time that you attempt to learn something new. And we have to remember that about not just the students in our lives, but the adults as well. It's about learning your skills and your tools so that eventually you'll be able to self-regulate your own learning. And when you are confronted with someone who no longer believes that cell phones have any place in their classroom, I think this is what they're dealing with. Really what they're dealing with is a self-regulation of that cell phone. That's the issue. And we have to teach that explicitly. Now, I didn't graduate with any of these skills. Did you? Do you think your students will? I worry that we're not doing enough urgently enough. I would argue that we need to have new reading strategies, that some of those strategies would include generating digital queries, that learning how to search and then look at your search results is something that I teach every single day, and this isn't about the idea of digital natives. This is about reading. This is about using. And I would also say that the multiple representations of text is a really big part of that, because students, readers, users might not recognize that what they're struggling with is the text. Or maybe it's not. Maybe the problem is that it's the device that you're using in this moment. That's our job as teachers, is to just slow it all down and try to, if we can, give them options. All right, now I'm going to give you some questions, and we're going to try something again, risky. I need you to go to a browser and go to kahoot.it. And in Kahoot, I'm going to give you a survey. We're treating, if you know this tool, what I'm trying to do is not use it as if it's a knowledge and understanding quiz, for example, but as if it's a survey about your own ideas. So to do that, I need to give you a PIN number. So now hold on to the chat while you're also in the browser for kahoot.it, because I'm going to leave you a PIN number there. Okay, and things might get a little bit crazy here for a second. I'm just not sure. Because, you know, I never tried it before. I'm so excited. But that's what transliteracy is all about, right, is being uncomfortable. Okay. The number is, Trish, I'm having trouble reading and typing at the same time. The number is 645790. Now, if you are with me, 645790 is your PIN number. I can see that some of you are already in the game. That's fantastic. Now, one thing that I'm not sure of is, are we going to be able to play Kahoot and see the questions and be able to answer all at the same time? So I'm going to try this sort of on my number at the same, my mobile device at the same time, and we'll just see how it goes. I'm finding that music is a little bit annoying, so I'm going to try to turn it off as much as I can. Okay, good. How are you doing? Do you think we have, I think I see 5, 8, 13 people. Are we getting close? Do you think that's everybody? $15, maybe 2 more? If there's anybody who can't do that? Okay, so we need to see the questions from you. Perfect. And I'm ready for that. So, your question number 1 is this one. Now, I want to tell you about these questions before we keep going, because I am going to press play, and then we'll only have 30 seconds to answer the questions. But the questions are not so much things that I'm already doing, but more things that I'm aiming for. So question number 1 is, in your situation, in your school, your classroom, your environment, do students have a choice of which technology to use in your school? All right, are you ready? I'm going to hit start. Okay, so you have 4 answers that you can choose from. Red triangle all of the time. Blue diamond most of the time. Yellow circle some of the time. Green square none of the time. Which one best suits you? We'll see. It turns out most of you said some of the time. Fair enough. Cassandra, don't worry. There are no marks for this. There are no prizes. So you're going to be just fine. Keep going with the next question. Next question. Any surprises there with technology to use in my school? No. But it's interesting, isn't it? How many of us are already thinking, yeah, some of the time, but I know I have room for improvement. No one said all. Okay, next question. Students have the option to work collaboratively in my school. Do they have that option to work collaboratively in your school? Well, it looks like some of you are already answering it. That's exciting. Good. Wow, you're fast. You're super fast. You did great. Okay. Most of the time. So they get to work collaboratively. Do we see collaboration as part of the things that we need to keep working on? Is that part of transliteracy? I think it is. I think it is. Okay, next question. Various authentic real-world investigations take place in my school throughout the year. What do you think? Real world? Really? Are they really authentic? I don't know. You guys are answering pretty darn quick. You seem pretty sure of yourselves. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, and time's up. Oh, looks like maybe someone didn't get to answer. Okay, yellow this time. So some of the time, things are real world. I think like if we could just work on that one thing, our transliteracy would improve, right? Because we would know they would have to have real examples. Okay, let's keep going. Next question. The students are creators versus consumers in my class. Are they just devouring all the information and the media that you give them? Or are they going to be creating some of that? 10, 11, 12. Oh, it's so exciting watching all this happen at the same time live. This is transliteracy, folks. Cool. Really? Look how many of you answered 10. That's amazing. 10 people answered some of the time. Fantastic. So it's happening. You are doing making in your classrooms. I'm encouraged by that. Okay. Question 5. My students are more active participants rather than passive passengers. And reflecting maybe on your own experience to answer that question. Were you the active participant in your own learning or the passive passenger? I hope you're feeling like you're active right now. That's the point. 11 answers. It's getting there. Boom. Some of the time. Most of the time. None of you said none of the time. I think we might have leaders here, Trish. These might be leader types. That's fantastic. Okay, next question. Question 6. Don't worry, there's only 10 questions. We rely on a textbook or a prescribed curriculum rather than integrating multiple resources. And you know who you are. I've talked to many people who struggle with this and their skill. I can't because the person who runs the department has already decided that 15 years ago when we spent all our money on those things, we have to keep using them. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, I'm very excited to see the answer to this. I hope it's encouraging. Let's see. Some of the time. Two people got to say all of the time. Congratulations to you. Are you hiring? I might be looking for to come and work in your building. Okay, fantastic. Here we go. Question 7. I provide multiple modes of learning in my teaching and learning experiences. So it's the kind of thing about providing multiple ways to access the information. Is it in video, maybe? Is it in a verbal way, an oral way, a kinesthetic way? Is it both social or solitary? You're not going to like alienate all those introverts, are you? I've got a book for you on that. Excellent. Still 4 seconds left. 16 answers. I think I can skip. There we go. Most of the time. Well done, well done. But I see that a couple people are still struggling with this. So maybe we've got some ideas about how we can keep reaching towards offering things in multiple modes and mediums. I got to keep that in mind. Mediums and modes. I'm just jotting this down actually with a pen and paper if you're curious to know which medium I'm using. Okay, question 8. Do you demonstrate or encourage creative and critical thinking with your teaching and learning experiences? Yes, this is a big thing that's happening in my school now. So do you demonstrate or encourage creative and critical thinking with your teaching / learning experiences? I know left brain, right brain doesn't really have a lot of basis in research anymore, but are we trying to appeal to both the logical and the creative? Oh, I'm skipping it. We've got 15 answers already. Excellent. Nice. Most of the time. Great. A couple people still stretching for this. Yeah, I know. And it's hard to be that conscious all the time. I think about critical thinking and creative thinking. Do you use real purpose, a real audience with formative and summative and less extrinsic motivators? In other words, what I'm trying to say is, are you still beating kids with a stick to get their stuff done, or leading them with the carrot of, well, I'll give you 4% extra if you can do it this way? Or is the reality, the authenticity of your task, the thing that's driving them? That was a hard one, wasn't it? Maybe we need to stop there for a second, Trish. Let's go back to the chat. It looks like we didn't have enough people to answer that one, or that it was too confusing of a question. So what I'm really saying is the difference between motivation that's extrinsic and intrinsic happening because your teaching is changing. It is a tough one, I know. Maybe what we should do is come back to that one. I'm just making another jot note to myself. And of course, if we could all teach intrinsic motivation, we would be out of a job, wouldn't we? I know. Okay, not so tricky. Just 2 more questions. Here we go. Here we go. Nope, sorry, 1 more question. Question number 10. Do you value process as much as product in your assessments? This is something that I'm trying right now, trying to feel comfy with actually putting marks on process. What happened? What happened? Most of the time. Nice. And again, people on either side. We've got some all of the time, and we've got some of the time. Okay, thank you everybody for indulging me. You can go back out of the Kahoot now and instead come on back to our slides and our chats. Melanie's got something good to say. She says, I feel like extrinsic motivation is dominant in popular culture and is systemic in education. Yep. I don't know what to say about that, Melanie. You're absolutely right. Does anybody want to jump in and say, I found it. I've got the answer. I've got the elixir for intrinsic motivation. This is what's happening. I still think it has something to do with authenticity. Okay. I wish I had the answer too, Judy. Let's see. Now I want to give you just a little bit of background, but really we're going to come back. You might want to come back to these slides later if you've never heard of some of these things. So ISTE, which is a massive technology and education organization in the United States. It's supposed to be international, but it's pretty much based in the United States. Focused first on these 6 proficiencies. And I want to just show you that. That's 2007. So we've already been working on this as a continent for at least 10 years. Okay, someone said, no, we just need to work on proficiencies. Do you remember when the proficiency thing was really big? Yeah, well, this is where it came from. Cognitive, technical, and ICT proficiency. Henry Jenkins, Trish is going to put, I hope that's a link. Henry Jenkins, if you're not following Henry Jenkins on Twitter, he's such a guru. He's somebody I go to all the time. Thanks, Trish. And he talks about digital literacies. And of course, the art teacher in me goes back to this list and gets excited because things like play, performance, simulation, but also appropriation are things that we talk about in the arts all the time. What I'm saying is how can we recombine some of those things? And there's some great books of that. Now, if you haven't seen this, this is Ontario's answer to some of this, and that is the 21st century competencies. Although people tell me we can now start calling them the global competencies, which are way down here. And this is maybe a draft copy. I haven't seen the new version yet. Maybe it's out there. But this global competencies involves basically the critical thinking we were talking about in the Kahoot, creativity again, the self-directedness, the self-aware thing. This is where I think we have a lot of work to do. Global citizenship, communications, and collaboration. Exactly. And thank you, Lisa. It's pointing it to the EdgeGames website there. I think they're working on making that a real website all on its own that has to do with global competencies. It was in process the last time I looked at it. But that's where we're headed. And I just want to remind you of the why. So here's an example. If you don't know these guys, these are literacy specialists, Bruce, Crockett, Jukes, and Churches. And they say that anything that can be outsourced or automated or turned into software probably isn't the sort of thing we should be teaching anymore. Now, if that doesn't make you uncomfortable, it probably makes someone in your building very uncomfortable. Just to emphasize that, I found this map, and it's about It's supposed to be showing the dominant profession in each state. Okay, it's not a Canadian example, but if you looked at all of the truck drivers and you thought, can they be automated? Yeah, I mean, we might change these into Google trucks, right? Have you ever seen those pictures yet? Maybe if you're searching the net at the same time, someone could pop a link into the self-driving truck revolution that's coming down the pipes. But also that all of these people are going to be unemployed or going to need retraining in order to be able to be employed. That's interesting. And I think it goes back to that other idea about how much literacy has changed. I think the literacy is really the fundamental shift that we need to do here. So I'm going to ask you one more time if you will go to this Padlet, jump out again. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can everyone hear now? Okay, good. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for that. So we're going to join this Padlet for a second. I'm just reflecting, if literacy is the fundamental thing that needs shifting, then how has your own reading changed just in the way that you do your reading, maybe in the last 10 to 15 years? How often you do it, where you do it, how you do it, what medium you do it. If you could jump onto the Padlet for me, I'd like to see your ideas come to life. And to operate a Padlet, if you've never done one before, you simply need to double-click anywhere. All right, good. We've got people jumping in here already. So, books to tablets. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the ebook, except for when I have to do 500 pages at once and I need to make notes in it. But I getcha. I know why it's useful. I know why it's handy. Texture. What do you mean about texture? Jump back to the chat and tell me about texture for a second. I read more online, multiple modes, including audio text. I think that's what that means. Yep, books to tablets, children's literature. Since moving to the library, I hardly have time to read adult books anymore. Well, isn't that the truth? That's both professional and timely. It'd be interesting to see that. Twitter, I read more online. Is there anybody who's reading different types of things that they used to? Anybody a fan of the podcast, for example? Anybody a fan of the graphic novel, which are having sort of a renaissance? Melissa, me personally or how you teach reading? I want you personally right now. How do you read differently? Yeah, I've got some podcast lovers. I read more online. Yep, absolutely you do. Right? Yeah, good point, Lisa. When you shorter pieces of text at the same time. Ah, Texture. Texture is an amazing paid app that has hundreds of magazines. Oh, thank you for that. So I guess it's kind of like the Netflix of magazines. Thanks for explaining that to me. I haven't heard of that before. Awesome. Okay, good. Jump back to the presentation again. So one of the things that we worry about in education is if reading is changing fundamentally, is it still deep enough? Is it still rich enough? Is the process, like, we missing out? Are we grooming kids for failure? It's hard. If you ask Nicholas Carr, he says, yeah, we're failing kids. We're failing everybody. Google is what's making us stupid, Nicholas Carr says. But the thing about Nicholas Carr, who is a very popular technology and cultural writer, he also says that reading online is changing our behavior. So tell me if you agree or disagree with this, maybe over in the chat box. Our ability to interpret text and to make the rich mental connections that form when we read deeply and without distraction is remaining largely disengaged because we're reading, as Lisa pointed out and others of you did, that there are shorter texts now, that this is maybe made more like by a bunch of collaborators, like or even a bot, rather than someone who is actually a writer. That's a very good point. But if we jump over to Jim Collins, has a little bit more of an optimistic point of view. And Jim Collins says that Nicholas Carr is only defining literary reading based on the technology that we're using for reading. But he says that it doesn't demonstrate in how reading technologies are actually part of our cultural practice. And he says that we're in a cultural infancy, that we're going to develop, or that we have already developed, different relationships with different mediums that are deeper but different, that are uncomfortable. And that's where we're struggling, is that we still define reading in the same way. Penny Kittle is one of my favorite literacy people to read, and she says we have to keep striving for deep reading engagement. I saw her speak maybe in, I'm going to say 2015, because somebody named Sandy sent me to the Reading for the Love of It conference, and it was awesome. And Penny said at the time that the number one reason that kids don't make it from first year post-secondary to second year post-secondary is because they're not handling the reading anymore. They're not handling the depth of reading. And that's a critical thinking issue. So that's pretty interesting. Another couple of authors I wanted to mention to you, good book as well, Building School 2.0. It's written in short little bits. So for anybody who's like, oh, I don't read deeply anymore, don't worry, Building School 2.0 is just the kind of thing that you need. And Chris Lehman and Zach Chase, who are both again on Twitter, built their own school. Pretty cool, eh? And they said that we need to recognize that technology is actually changing the way that we think. It's changing the way we behave. It's changing the way that we have relationships. And here are the 5 things that technology is changing the most. I can't think of one interaction I have daily that doesn't involve one of those 5 things when I'm using technology. So what kind of strategies and practices do we have that might actually be supportive of some of the new directions that we want to get to with our transliteracy skills? If we're going to do this, let's go back to Canadian Michael Fullen for a second. He says that there are 4 criteria we need to keep striving for if we're going to integrate technology and pedagogy. One of those things is to make it irresistibly engaging, right? When you think about the Chromebook, do you love it? I don't know. And maybe that's because I'm not the demographic for the Chromebook. I love my iPad. It goes everywhere that I do. But that's just me, right? And I also have to recognize that one size doesn't fit all. So it has to be elegantly efficient, easy to use. Still striving for that in my environment, right? Technologically ubiquitous. This is where I'm talking about, let's put our stuff out there. If we can't make it 24/7, we're not working hard enough. I know, that's the kind of thing that gets me up in the morning. And of course, steeped in real life problem solving. So some of my questions for the survey are the things that I got from Michael Fullen and from the other experts that I've already mentioned. TPAC, can I just see in the next to your name, could you please put up a check mark if you know this formula, this wonderful formula of pedagogy mixed with content, mixed with technology? Waiting to see half. Okay, so let's just say that people are looking for ways to open conversations about how do we involve technology in education. This is one of the first models developed in 2006. So I just want you to be aware of it. The idea is, and I'm going to put my son right in the middle, that we're aiming for the middle, that we might be really great at pedagogy and content, and you know who you are, and not so great at technology. But I know lots of people who are great at technology and content and not so great at the pedagogy. The trick is to keep aiming for the center. And then TPAC was criticized because although it is really focused on individualized learning and it emphasizes the process of learning, it doesn't really talk about technology and pedagogy because we need to know the how. So the next person that came along was the Sammer model. Now we're running out of time and I'm aware of that, maybe based on some of the things that happened at the beginning of the seminar, but mostly because I really want to make sure that you have a great model to take with you. I'm going to leave the Sammer model video for you to explore on your own at another time, but there's the YouTube link. and instead draw your attention just to the image that we know the SAMR model by. It's developed by Dr. Ruben Puentedura in 2006, and he argued that we kind of move this way, up the ladder from enhancement to transformation, and that we have trouble getting past this part right here, this line in the middle, that making the leap from augmentation to modification is a really big difference. So let's say, for example, if we were to say, take a word processing document. You remember the day, hopefully you don't know this, but maybe you still know people who do this, where we hand wrote our rough copy and then we went to the computer lab and we typed it up. That would be a great example of substitution because it looks pretty, it looks great. But that's when we acting as a direct tool substitute, but with functional improvement, it would because, hey, I can edit live in a word processing piece of software. When we start to cross over the line of modification, it's because we're actually collaborating, for example, with something like a Google Doc, and I can revise live with you. We can write at the same time together. But also, with redefinition, we're talking about being able to do that with maybe a global audience, a previously inconceivable purpose, something that rich authenticity and that big reach. SAMR, though, is tricky because you're always moving up. And I had someone that I really admire question me about that. So I've come down to this. The best model is this. Here is my Zen mantra for you to take away. It's okay to be where you are. It's just not okay for you to stay there. We need to keep working harder to make sure that we have transliteracy skills and that our students, our staff are working towards these things and are able to. We have to crush the barriers that stand between them and transliteracy altogether. One of those barriers might be the availability of technology in your schools. You know, the fact that there's some inequity that happens there, right? It's awkward, but it needs to be out in the open. The assessment of how people are using technology so that we're jumping closer to the redefinition than making time to do things that are not taking advantage of the fact that we've got such powerful tools in our buildings now. That there's actually technical support and maybe training and maybe professional development for people who need it. And that we're trying to talk about technology in terms of the workplace and the community that we live in, our contexts. Finally, a lack of access to resources. And this is more and more troubling in Canada when we don't have publishers who even really are mandated to make Canadian content outside of things like textbooks. You know, and that the access to resources shouldn't be prohibitively expensive. We have to keep working on things like that. So I want to give you an idea, and that is the Citizenship and Redefining Community. I know, another book to read. You're like, you're such a librarian, Alana. But Dana Boyd, it's complicated. If you haven't read anything on how technology is changing our adolescents, the students that we're working with, you got to read this. This is based on 10 years of research in social media and teens, and you'll be surprised at what some of the results are. One of the results is that citizenship is actually not just, this is part of our culture that's changing. What does it mean to be a citizen in the year 2018? It means that we have an offline impact on things like art and heritage and education and archives now because of the online communities that exist. Think about this one, for example. Oh, Melanie's saying, yay, I love Dana Boyd. Another fan with Lisa, that's perfect. Right, and I'm just giving you some ideas there about how we might think about citizenship as something different than when we were in school. Okay, so how do the librarians promote reading in 2018? This is really what you came for. I want to give you so many good things to take away. Don't be frustrated. You've got this. First of all, if you've never heard of these things, I just wanted to point out that the Learning Commons model, the Together for Learning documents, and the Canadian-wide Leading Learning Standards of Practice for School Library Learning Commons, this is where librarians take their ideas from in terms of implementation today. And maybe I'll just get anybody who already heard of these things to give me some applause. Over next to your name. Would you do that? Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. And Betty, yay, and Melanie, perfect. Okay, so just so you know that there's a purpose behind some of these things, but that there's also a guiding light. So it looks like this. Now, doesn't this remind you of those global competencies? We're cultivating, we're fostering, we're designing, advancing, and facilitating. Yeah, we're working towards transliteracy. Corianne, you can have everything I've ever mentioned for free, just because I like you. Don't worry about that. So let's talk about specifically just reading tools, okay? One of them is that the forest of reading. Now, I don't know if you know how special the forest of reading is, but if you don't have this operating in your school, you need to tell somebody to start doing it or start doing it yourself. The forest of reading is almost unique in Canada, and what it is it's a group of books picked by teacher librarians, vetted by teacher librarians, and they're put together by age. But there's not just ages for kids, there's ages for adults too. So we've got the White Oak that are talking about for adult learners of English. We've got Evergreen, which a lot of public libraries run because it's sort of a summertime book club for people. We should totally do that. But one of my favorite teaching resources, other than the Forest of Reading, and I have almost all the Forest Reading books in my school, is Less Plan. Less Plan is a Canadian resource, and what it does is it basically provides you with a PDF 8 to 10 times a year, depending on if there's new juicy stuff coming out, on current events presented in a critical thinking way. And the critical thinking exercises often also reinforce some of the literacy structures that we are most concerned about. There's lots of web links. There's an online place for kids to go as well. You've got to check out Less Plan. It's in English, it's in French. I know, you want to tell everybody, don't you? It's also from, I think, K to 12. I, of course, use the 9 to 12, but it's fantastic. So those are a couple of the reading tools that I think promote transliteracy and are Canadian and suit the context in which we live. Let's think about more reading tools. Reading tools specifically that improve workflow for curation and for note-taking. I've got down here my Google Docs, but the Google Suite. But at the same time, if you have Microsoft, that is not a barrier by any stretch of the means. The point of it is that we've got collaborative documents that do the basic things. I get complaints still from people who say it's not as robust as things like our Microsoft package. But for students who are learning, it's awesome. It's just what they need. I have to tell you as well that I'm starting to curate in different ways. And the my two favorite curation tools as a librarian, because I like to share it, are Scoop It and Flipboard. And what they do is they let you to collect things together, and kids could do this too, collect things together and then share them back out again and say, guess what? I collected a whole bunch of websites on this thing that I'm interested in. For example, I collected a Flipboard on texts that I thought were in multiple modes and mediums, put them all on my Flipboard on something really hard, like what are the causes of the war in Syria and why are people coming to Canada? To try to explain that is very difficult. Scoop It, again, is something like, I'm going to say that Leslie Whiddon, who's an Ontario educator, turned me on to Scoop It, and that's because she put all of her things that were creative nonfiction all in one place, and I said, oh, I like that, and it kind of turns into a newspaper, and I use that a lot. Whenever I'm on my phone and I'm at a conference, I use Evernote. If I was graduating into post-secondary for the first time in the year 2018, Evernote is the tool I would tell all of my students to get because it works on every platform. How many pieces of software can you say that that is true about? It's unbelievable. It records in audio, it records in video, it would record, record like your lecture notes, you can take pictures. I can share it. I use it all the time. I'm going to say of a good example is shopping for a lawnmower with my husband. I'm in Canadian Tire and he's in Home Depot, and we're both shopping for the lawnmower and sharing pictures and notes and stats about the lawnmowers with each other. I know, it's crazy, but that's an example of a real life thing that we could do it for. And the one thing that I'm thinking maybe you haven't heard of is Foxit Reader. And I'm going to tell you that I could not have survived my completely online master's in education without it, because it allows you to annotate the PDF and keep track of your reading all in the same time. It's fantastic. Corianne, are you telling me that Microsoft OneNote is equal to or better than Evernote or Foxit Reader? Tell me why you like it so much. Yes! Okay, Corianne says yes. Okay, fine. So, reading tools, how are we going to make reading exciting? How do we engage students and make it real life? Well, we go back to our Lev Vygotsky. We make it social. And these are my favorite tools for things like that. Blogger, again, because Google owns it. Now, but any blogging platform would work. But we need to get kids to be explicit about what they're reading. Goodreads, I live a lot on Goodreads, and I have it on everything that I'm signed up for and on every platform, because it allows me to collate and curate my own lists of what I'd like to read. I can put them into lists about what I think that they would suit, and I use it all the time. There's even on my phone, I can walk into a bookstore, and I've done this in museums and libraries when I don't want to walk out with 20 books, but I want to walk out with the titles, and I can scan the ISBN, and it goes automatically into my Goodreads list. I know, librarians, I'm totally nerding out right now. And not everybody has access to this, but I want you to check out, if you can, a piece of software that we have in our database suite in Upper Grand District School Board called Novelist. And Novelist is a really nice social place where kids can rate their reading, but it also helps them find sort of, if you liked The Hunger Games, then you might like this, and we use it all the time for that. It helps them talk about more complex issues, things like theme, things like tone, things like style. It's fantastic. And all of these tools help me to make reading thinking visible. I know, Lisa, that was just for you. Okay, reading tools. Okay, multiple modes and formats. We knew that. I know that, but going back to this in the survey, some of you felt like this is an area where you can still work on improvement. So why not try to provide in your classroom, in your environment, in your library, a place where people can find out about podcasts? How about, did you know that your first audiobook through Audible is for free? Now that's an adult thing. I don't know that I would recommend Audible to anybody unless they had to buy the audiobook, but I absolutely love audiobooks. I think it's because I love to still go to the theater. I love radio plays, but I actually heard Johnny Depp read to me the life story of Keith Richards in an audiobook. So if you haven't tried it, that one's a really juicy one. It's a fantastic exercise in exploring the audiobook for the first time if you've never done that. And then these are another couple of things that we have access to through Upper Grand, and I know that they're happening in other schools and other places. Overdrive is the ebook audiobook, what do I call it? Like the middleman for public libraries, and we also have it. Overdrive works on your phone, on your device, and so what I think is so great about it is we can do lending right there. Now, I did see earlier somebody said, oh, Corianne said Overdrive is inconsistent. I'm wondering if that's because of content, and that's a big publisher issue, but it's something we can keep advocating for sure, is that the audiobook is actually outselling ebooks like by a lot. And the reason I mention that is because if someone's going to pay money in your school district for either audiobooks or ebooks, I would say get the audiobooks. And maybe I'll ask Trish for a real quick help. There's an Ontario, and not every province has this, resource called Arrow that's there, and it's about accessibility. And so for anybody who has a special education identification, they also have access to audiobooks through Arrow. It's really interesting. Lisa, that's very interesting. You can also modify the speed of audiobooks if you want to listen faster. So maybe tell your husband that. Learn 360 is also got a lot of great Canadian content. And I recommend it all the time for educational videos. They're starting to parcel up massive, how can I put it, like full-length movies, but they're starting to piece them up so you don't need to watch them all at the same time. And that's another new thing in Learn 360 that I really like about it. Yeah, Melanie is just saying it has unusual formats and audiobooks from your experience. It's true. And you can put in a request to have something drawn up if you're seeing something that's not awesome. It does take 2 weeks. Okay, so finally, I'm going to leave you with this idea that the transliteracy is such an important thing that we all need to be focusing on, whether this is a whole school mandate or something that you just try to improve with or inside the microcosm of your learning environment. I wanted to bring up this example, which is of Chris Hadfield. Now, you might already know Chris Hadfield singing the David Bowie song, but did you know that Chris Hadfield's video was actually removed after 1 year for copyright infringement? I know, isn't that shocking? If you already know this story, can you give me a check mark over on the left-hand side? Okay, thank you, Sheila. Just asking for your patience then. I'm going to keep going. The idea is that Chris Hadfield's version of Space Oddity was removed from YouTube for copyright infringement. What do you think was the issue? So just going full circle back to our media triangle. Was it an issue about the song itself? Was it an issue because, you know, Chris Hadfield's so 2016 and, you know, he wasn't meeting the needs of his audience anymore? Was it an issue about production? Where do you think the copyright? Good. Jan's on the right track. Royalties. Royalties to who, do you think, Jan? Who was supposed to get some royalties from this? And I'll just give a shout out while you're thinking about this question once more to the Association for Media Literacy. There are so many fantastic resources on this website. It's unbelievable. The songwriter, potentially Bowie's estate. Guess what? Bowie gave his permission. Sheila's trying desperately not to ruin it for the rest of you. Oh, Lisa, you know this story too? Bowie's estate. No, they were fine with it. You're right, Corianne, NASA was the issue. It's NASA, because guess what? Chris Hadfield used multiple pieces of the space station to organize. Well, guess what? Different countries built different pieces of the space station. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Corianne, you really do get a prize. I think you need to have an extra piece of chocolate or whatever it is that suits your fancy today. Yeah, so they couldn't decide, where does the copyright lie? Does it lie with the space station because it's owned by different countries and different pieces? Does it lie with David Bowie, who really actually made this in the first place, this whole song? Does Chris Hadfield get a stake? He kind of goes back to Nina Paley. He's remixing this, right? He even changed some of the words for the situation. And then we think about, does it really matter in terms of culture and history? Is it going to be an issue soon? Well, I would argue that it is, because we weren't ready to handle this awesome video by Chris Hadfield when this happened and the copyright down. Don't worry, Chris Hadfield's worked it out. Everybody's given their permission. It's back online. You can still watch Chris Hadfield singing David Bowie as much as you want to. I want to finish there by saying thank you so much for your attention. If we have time, I'm sure that Trish wouldn't mind if we took questions, if you want to grab the mic or add anything into the chat box there. I hope that if nothing else, I've just stirred up some trouble for you, but I hope that you will continue the conversation with me for many years to come, both on Twitter. I'm at banana29. Maybe you can find out some other things that I've been interested in recently through threadbarebeauty.com, and I'll leave it up to you there. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to jump in there. Yes, we can certainly stick around for some questions. How about I just do a couple of things first, and then we'll put Helena back on the chat for you as well, too. So, wow, I agree with all the things that are coming in. Certainly lots to think about. Me, too. I was following right along, going to all the links and everything else. By the way, if you haven't been to threadbarebeauty.com, it's fabulous. Tons of stuff in there for you all. And I need now your feedback not only in the chat here, but if you could complete this survey for us, that would be terrific. I'm going to try to put a link into the box. There it is. So you can either click the one on the screen or in the chat. Once you do that, then what you get is a certificate will be sent to you. Plus, you also are going to get an email tomorrow, and it will have a resource link in it, like this one, and you can print off a certificate. I know some of you use those for other purposes. That really helps us out for future webinars. Particularly, some of you may want to hear more on any of these topics. Please let us know, because that's how we generate our next kind for us. I also want to make a quick reminder that OTF does offer a subsidy of $450 for any math, technology, or kindergarten workshop or AQ courses. And please check into that. And I'm going to put it back here quick. I'm going to be stopping the recording, so this is my last official. Thank you to everybody that was so patient tonight and going at a few extra minutes with us. That's terrific. What happens is if you go to the survey, once you're done the feedback, if you don't have any other questions for Alana or myself, then simply just close the window, the Blackboard Collaborate window, and that's how you leave the room. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes, and then we'll give Alana a break tonight, too. She was terrific. So I'm going to stop the recording now and let you do that survey.